Now let's talk about Liskov substitution principle. It is called Liskov by the name of Barbara Liskov, who actually introduced that at a conference keynote. And this is, again, a pretty formal description and pretty hard to read. So if S is subtype of T, then objects of type T may be replaced with other objects or substituted. So it's quite a complex thing. But basically what it means is that you need to be able to replace any class that implements some interface with any other class of that interface without breaking the program, without breaking your application or its behavior. And it's all about parameters, what does it return, methods, everything needs to be within the same rules of the interface. Let's take a look at the example. Earlier in this course, you have already seen the example of employees with their own position and years in company and salary is calculated. And I want to expand on that example with some substitutions. So in the model of employee, there's getSalary attribute, which calculates the salary using some classes. So salary calculator is the dynamic class. And for example, there's a designer salary calculator, which has the method of calculate, and the parameter is start date. And also, for example, there's a developer salary calculator, and it's all implementing this interface, salary calculator interface, which is simple. One method, one parameter returns float. But what if you want to change some behavior in some of those classes? For example, some calculator doesn't depend only on start date and may not even return float, or maybe you want to add some method in that interface. So what that principle says, substitution principle, Liskov substitution principle, is that whatever you do, you need to be able not to break this calling of that class. So it needs to be under the same rules of calculate, parameters, and what does it return. So my first advice related to that, luckily from PHP 7, we are able to have type hints. So you need to always use what is the parameter. Is it string? Is it integer? Is it something else? Or is it some kind of class object? Also, what does the function return? Float or something else? With that, PHP would throw an error or exception if something violates the type hints or returns. So for example, if something is passed from the model in other format, in other variable, or returns something different, PHP would throw an error which you would be able to catch then. So in other words, use the rules for yourself in the future or for other developers, both in the interface and in all the other classes that implement that interface, something like this. Now let's take a look at a scenario where you want to change that class. For example, for director salary calculator, I've added a few comments here. You need to add another parameter of bonus, for example, specifically for directors or for some other position. And how do you do that? First, of course, you need to type hint everything, and then you may work around it. So for example, if you do it like this, then again, even PHP Storm underlines that there's no parameter within salary calculator interface. And indeed, there's no bonus here. So one way of doing that, if you need that for specific class, is add a default value, which would not throw an error if it's not used. But even that is kind of a violation of that Liskov substitution principle, because the classes should have the same parameters and the same returns. Another way of doing that, if you add another parameter, you should then change the interface. And in the interface, if we do float bonus here, so you add float here, and then this is not underlined anymore. But let's take a look at other calculators. Then you need to change all the other calculators because it's underlining this part now. Declaration must be compatible. So even if you don't use that bonus here in the designer salary calculator, you still need to define it. So float bonus and with default value here, if you wish. Maybe you don't need the default value, but that is not underlining anymore and it would not throw a PHP error. So my point is, if you need to add another parameter of the method, then you should add it either with default value or change all the classes of the interface and change the interface itself. Another example is if you want to add a method to one of the classes of the implementation of that interface, you have a choice here. You may add it as a private function if it's only within your class, so within the director salary calculator, and then you would be able to use it within other methods of that class. Or same thing, you need to add that to the interface as well. Because if you call that, for example, from here, like format or something, it may be implemented in one class in director salary calculator, but maybe other developers missed that in their own calculators. Maybe some calculator will be added in the future by other developer. And that's the whole point of solid movement, of solid principles. What if something changed in the past or changes in the future? It may be by someone else. So then you would need to add that function, that feature to the interface. So public function format. Again, you need to define what does it return, float salary string, something like this. And then implement that format in all the other calculators, because now this again is underlined because it doesn't implement the interface anymore strictly. So you need to add that format with the same float, salary, and string, and return something, return string. So be careful with adding a feature, a function into one of the implementation of the classes. Then take a look at the whole interface, or if you just need that for that one particular class, then probably make it private and then call that method from the other methods of that class. So this is in short Liskov substitution principle.